Hey guys, it's Kris Jones for episode 96 of Ask Me Anything. And today's show is going to be an interview with my good friend Tom Curra, who is the CEO of WVIA TV. So, in full disclosure, we've known each other for probably 6-7 years now. I joined your board of directors about 5 or 6 years ago, and I've really had the privilege, if you will, in a positive way, of being able to see the mission of this station in action, right? Folks out there that are watching this may have seen WVIA on TV or may listen to one of your radio stations, which is one way of engaging with the station. The other way is to come here and to see the studio and to see the staff and to have gotten to know you. But so I know the WVIA story, but I'm not sure my viewers do. So let's start with, if you don't mind, before we get to WVIA, you have a very interesting story of how you got here. So what, are you from the area? What did you do prior to that led you up to WVIA?
So I have been in production since 1984, when I graduated from Indiana University, Pennsylvania. I went for film and TV, and I was really aggressively trying to get an internship on the Letterman show. And my sister, I grew up in New York, and my sister was residing in New York at the time. So I had the whole thing mapped out. I was going to live with her, and I didn't get it. And then my mom is from this region. She's from Waverly, Pennsylvania. Yep. And we used to summer up here a lot. And my grandfather had a big farm in Waverly. So she said, this is really good station, WNEP TV here. And she goes, I think, why don't you just, stop swinging for the fence, which I love to do.
Yes, you did.
And she said, why don't you just come to Pennsylvania and do this? And so I did. I took an internship there, and if they would ask me to scrub, the bathrooms with my toothbrush, I would have. I just love this stuff so much. And Bill Christian was the executive producer at the time, and
this is at WNEP TV.
WNEP, and he's still a dear friend and a mentor to me. He now owns several stations. So he hired me after my internship. But this was an interesting story. So upstairs in the old building by the airport, there was a television remote company, and they were just starting. The Shelburne family owned WNEP at the time, and they were called the Super Shooters, and their tractor trailers with control rooms in them, and they started doing sports. So they had, I think, Super Shooter 1 and Super Shooter 2 at the time. And I used to leave WNEP, go over there to the field shop, and I'd clean cables, and I'd clean anvil cases, and they'd give me harnesses of wire, and I learned how to put these trucks together. Yeah. And then I think it was like a Memorial Day weekend. I got a phone call. At that time, we didn't have cell phones, but my mother got a phone call from Tom Shelburne, and they were recording the Grateful Dead at the Meadowlands for HBO. And one of the cameras in the tower had fell. Okay. And he said, "Can you go back to the shop and get me a camera?" And I had this TR6 at the time. So these cameras were heavy, and the tripods were heavy, and I pulled it in a Meadowlands to cars like that. And I hung out for the whole show, and so I was hired at WNEP shortly thereafter, but I would start freelancing on the weekends, working for Tom Shelburne and the Super Shooter company. So I did that for years. I was literally working 7 days a week, running around doing sports. At that time, was just putting cable into stadiums. I was on the utility crew. So like Pocono Speedway, we'd be there for days putting in cable. And then the show started. It was for ESPN, and at the time it was kart racing. It was like another. The kart racing broke off from the Indy cars. There was a kind of riff, and with the Andrettis and stuff. So this guy Twister was out of Chicago, I think, or North Carolina. And he got sick and he couldn't make it. So it was the pit camera, and I was his utility guy. I would, just make sure he didn't run into anything. I'd hold onto his belt, and there was cable at the time. And so they said, "You're up." So I started running camera, and then I was doing that for years, all over the country. And then I was at Notre Dame doing a game, and it was like 20 below zero. I'm not kidding. And I was in the end zone camera, and I thought I was going to die. And I said, I'm not doing this. I want to get in the truck because everybody's cozy. So I went from there. I started doing some replays in the truck. And then I moved to video, which is the person that shades the cameras when it goes from. And then I went from video, I went to tech managing. And so
this was all in this. Was it sports and entertainment or just sports you were covering?
Entertainment.
Okay.
Yeah, but primarily sports. Pretty much covered every sport except cricket, I think.
And you must have been traveling
all the time.
Yeah,
all the time. And then then the New York Times bought WVIA, and I was a special projects producer at the time. I went to producing Pennsylvania Art to Life, to producing special projects, and I really loved producing. And then in '96, the New York Times was downsizing, and at that time, I was leaving for New York City, somewhere in there. I think it was in '92. And the president of the company, who was actually moved up, he was COO of the New York Times broadcast groups. I think there was 6 stations. And he said to me, listen, I want to start a production company within the New York Times. Do you? And I was actually in his office to tell him I was leaving. I was going with J.R. McCabe and a few other guys into the city to start our own production company. And cable was just starting to take, and they were looking for producers, and I think we can do this. It was a perfect time. And I said, so they offered me, a little more money and this job to really produce for the whole New York Times group. So it was a McCall's magazine, it was Sailing World, Cruising World, Golf Digest, as well as the New York Times magazine, HR videos, like everything. And I said, wow, this is great, and I'm perfect for this job. And so I told him it was a Friday, and he said, well, I need to know by Monday. And I told him I'd take it on Monday. So then that. And I was working in another city a lot, but they built a new building, and so we had a section of that building, and we were producing for everybody within the New York Times company. And in '96, Lance Premise was he was like really technology driven, and he wanted to bring color into the newspaper, and there was a lot of controversy going from black and white to color, as you can imagine. He had left the company, and so his vision kind of left too, and I was all part of that. Yeah. So in '96, I decided to go full-time freelance, and I was just freelancing. I was primarily with CBS, NBC, ESPN, and Fox, and I was just traveling everywhere. It was really a good gig because you didn't have time to spend money. I mean, golf was a 7-day gig, racing was a 7-day gig. It was a great experience for me.
So you've at this point you're already 10, 15 years into your career.
Yeah.
And so let's transition to how you joined WVIA. But how was WVIA originally founded? Because you've told me this story before. Does it intersect with anything you've said, or did it happen many years before that?
64.
Okay, many years before it. Yeah.
I was 50 years old. We just celebrated the 50th anniversary. But I remember. So I started a documentary production company. I met this guy in L.A., Greg McCoskey, and we quickly became friends. And he had some skills I didn't, and I had some skills that he didn't. I had the business and the distribution skills. He had the cinematography skills. He wanted to break into directing. I was a producer, so we started doing some major stuff, and I was hiring him to work with the New York Times production company, and our relationship even grew more. We shot the New York Times magazine. Oh no, it was actually the New York Times. They were creating a new insert for the region. It was more of a regional insert, and we did stories. I mean, we did shoots with like it's really famous people, and so it was fun. Kissinger, and so then in '96, they were reorganizing the company, and the New York Times company. You have to understand, it's like 80% politics and 20% work. It's a monster, and I just wasn't wired that way. I'm really like to work. I put my head down and I work. So I became uncomfortable more and more, and I said, "This is I got to get out of here." So I left in '96. They were downsizing our division, and so it was an opportunity for me to rethink things. And then I got into the full-time freelance on sports, and we really dove into doing documentary productions. So the one thing storytelling, and that's my thing, and I love it. I can't say I produced it. I was the editor of a documentary about James Reston. He was a columnist, famous columnist in the New York Times, and he was retiring. They called him Scotty. And Susan Dreyfus, which was Punch Sulzberger's niece, and her father was the publisher back in the early 60s or mid-60s or late 60s and 70s. And Punch took over, which was Arthur Sulzberger, and I got to know the family really well. And so WVIA was the presenter of this documentary to the PBS system.
Got it.
And that's how I got to know Bill Kelly.
Got it.
And so Susan Dreyfus, we were doing screenings around the country with press clubs and things like that, and Bill was the presenting station. Bill and WVIA was the presenting station to the PBS system. And then I brought Bill another documentary that made it into the system, and then my wife and I at the time were starting a family, and the road was becoming extremely challenging. I was never home. So at the time, Bill was looking for a successor, that he could work with until he was ready to retire. And I did a premiere of actually two films, and they were packed. One was at Marywood University. It was called Empty Place at the Table, which won the Independent Film Festival in New York City.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And then it was a social documentary, and I premiered Stories from the Mines, which also made it to PBS. And so he was showing up at these events, and he was really selling me. And then that started like in July of '03. And then it was coming into October. He says, "You got to make a decision." And I was still freelancing as well. And I said, "Listen, how about if we have lunch with my wife? The three of us sit down and talk." So we met, and he goes, "You kidding me?" I said, "No." I said, "I wanted to hear your pitch, and this is this decision that I'm going to take a hit financially, which I did, significant." And I said, "But I think it's getting off the road is probably a good idea." So we sat down, and Marcy interviewed him, and I just kind of listened. And then we left, and I said, "What do you think?" She said, "I think it's good. I think it's, we're going to take a hit, but we'll be okay." And so I did it. And so I came in, and I was, I think, vice president of television and production at the time, and promotion. And then I took over underwriting and became executive vice president. And then, after a while, I just started running the whole station for him. And he really loved doing interviews and being a journalist. And so we complemented each other. I was like running the whole station, and he was, doing these really important interviews.
When I came in, and it was in Bill's last year, to me, having met you through that and just started to spend time with you, one of the things I really admire about you is you have this we're sitting here relaxed in a chair, right? But you're moving around. You're very entrepreneurial. You have that spirit that exists within the entrepreneur who just always needs to be doing something, moving forward, making things. And in your case, and we're going to get to that in a second, storytelling. Because, and just getting to know you over the last bunch of years and just reading your background, I think that's this entrepreneurial spirit has been like just building up inside you, and you've used storytelling to kind of support that desire. But so you end up, you guys decide that okay, you're going to come to WVIA full time, and you eventually worked your way up where you're now CEO of this organization. So let's chat about WVIA. What about it as a vehicle to storytell do you love most? What about this station? What about its mission? What about it? Why here? Because you could be anywhere. You could be anywhere in the world, producing, filming, editing, whatever you want. So we're very, very fortunate to have you here. But what is it? What is it that you love most about WVIA?
The people I work with, I think, is first and foremost. We have a great team. We're collaborative, but we challenge each other at the same time. It's not like they yes me, they don't. I'm always throwing ideas out constantly. Some go and some don't, or they'll build on it. But I really love working with the people here. We've been through a lot together. The station was challenged for many years. And on the production side, our production team is really second to none. They're all professional storytellers. They understand arc. They understand the beginning. They understand the middle. They understand the end. They understand everything.
Yeah.
And so the climax. So what gets me up in the morning is, once in a while I need to represent the station on television, and I do that sparingly. That doesn't excite me. In fact, I'm not comfortable with it at all. But what gets me up in the morning is really having a well-oiled machine, a company that's serving the region in very, very unique ways. And we don't just serve them on the air with radio, TV, and web. We have 3 radio stations, 3 TV stations, and our digital platform. We do a lot with underprivileged children. We do a lot of outreach with education using the PBS Kids assets, literacy, in hygiene. We go into Head Starts.
Let's break that down a bit. So WVIA is a not-for-profit. The organization is affiliated with PBS and NPR. How does that work? What does that affiliation look like?
So we license their programming, and then we build upon it. So without our member support, which is like $1.7 million a year, so they are supporting this organization. That it's a product that they get for free. And it's just not the programs like Nova, Masterpiece, the American Experience, our local documentaries which really resonate. I like to say we're a beacon of integrity, and especially now in challenging times with the media. Depending on your affiliation or your whether you're Republican or Democrat, you watch certain channels. And so they, people will say, well, PBS, not generally PBS, I think more NPR. Because even the Koch brothers supports PBS, so they do. I mean, if you notice, they support Nova, which is a huge production and a lot of money to produce. But we have a lot of conservatives as well as liberals watching PBS. We just do. It's not reality. It's solid fiction. And so when you look at NPR side, we get challenged a lot, saying that that's more of a liberal slant, and I don't think it's based on how NPR presents the news with a liberal slant. I think it's the topics they cover.
Yeah.
LGB.
Yep.
They try to talk to all the people, and that includes whites, African American,
Sure.
Hispanic,
Absolutely.
gay people, and they talk to everybody. And so, if you're extremely conservative, you don't want to hear that stuff. And that's just that's the way people think. And I'm not judging that, but that's just we're not. We're not. It's not a liberal slant as far as how we present the information. It's just the topics, I think, are liberal. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. But PBS and NPR, that content exists. Folks could see it on WVIA assets, so our TV stations, our radio. But we fill in, if you will, the other, when we're not distributing that content, we fill it in with local programming, which gives us as a station, or you as a station, to storytell and to focus on the community. So can we chat a little bit more about WVIA, the station, not the content we're getting from PBS and NPR. We have a number of amazing assets. Your staff, you guys have won awards at the highest level for some of the content that you've produced. So what are some of the sort of local assets, that local content that
resonated?
Yeah, that resonated.
So we a lot of our work is distributed nationally on PBS, and there's stories about the region. So how we present these stories, we really are a beacon of integrity. We're telling our region's stories, and they're being picked up by 90% of the stations in the country.
That's awesome.
So I mean, I want to put a map of the United States in the lobby with dots on them, and then have it color coded where you see let's see, one of the big ones was Eastern Europeans. We told that story here, but then we tweaked the script, and then we went national, and you could see it was distributed 100% of the country.
Sure.
And when stations like NET in New York, or HYY in Philadelphia, or Detroit, Chicago, or LA, when they're picking that stuff up, and it's like, wow, we really, it's like you're hitting a home run. It just resonates out of the park, and it's our story. These are our stories, and people are embracing them around the country. That's when it feels really good.
And then even the local programming, Call the Doctor as an example. You guys, tell us more about Call the Doctor. What's the point of that particular program?
So that's been a show on the air for 35 years. If you look at our region, the primary industry drivers are education, healthcare, national gas industries up there, defense. So the Call the Doctor show. This is interesting. We changed how we developed the show. Usually they just talk about an illness, and people would call in and talk to doctors. So we tweaked that. So we worked with Wilkes University and the Institute of Economic Development and Public Policy, and they do a lot of research in the area, and they did a health assessment of the area. And we took the top, dozen or 15 illnesses that are really prevalent in the area, and then we produce local content, and we tell people where they can go if to get tested, and we have professional doctors from all these different institutions talking about it. And so we're giving people important information, how to get tested, what to expect, where you can go for help, and it's really a highly watched show.
Why is WVIA membership important?
Well, we wouldn't be able to do what we do, and more importantly, we're the only locally owned station. we just, this is owned by the people. This is the asset of the people. And so you have, WNEP, who's owned, their headquarters is in Chicago, the Tribune Company. WOLF, their headquarters is in Maryland, Sinclair Company. BREYU is Nexstar, Texas. So, the money that we receive from members actually supports the work we do for the region, in the community we do. Now, they do news. We do professional storytelling. We tell the region stories. And we also, we organize our content filter in a way, so we have this big production coming down from PBS Vietnam. So what are we going to do with that, right? So we had like 9 weeks of digital stories that we put on, that had over 100,000 full views, where we would do telling stories of regional veterans. And then it culminated where we invited all these, we work with the local regional veteran organizations. So Burns's films were on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. On Friday, we had them just coming and having conversations and coming together. We had, we served food in the studio. They sat down in the theater, the studio theater, and they just talked and shared their stories. And some of them, it was for the first time that they ever even talked about this. And so we convene them, we let them tell their stories, we give them the platform to talk about their experiences, and it went really well. So we did 2 of those, as well as leading up to the Ken Burns, and we did a 9-part digital series leading.
And so when you identify an issue or a segment of the community whose story needs to be told, that's ultimately what WVIA is here to do, whether it be the Call the Doctor program to help inform and educate and answer questions from the community on health-related issues, whether it be the example you just shared of veteran outreach and giving a platform for our region to celebrate our veterans and to ultimately tell their stories. WVIA also has done that at the high school level. You guys have programs in the arts and in sciences and other things to give young people a platform to get recognized and to tell their story. So
that's really an important part, because the other stations will always key in on sports. We don't do sports. We key on scholastic and arts. So the best and the brightest kids in the region, and the artists in the region, we shine a spotlight on those kids. This is their platform. And they compete for it. I mean, like the Artist of the Week has become extremely competitive in the high schools. They then use that story that we tell about them to actually go to college and get into art schools. I mean, I can't tell you how many kids leverage that, and they leverage the videos, and then online, because these the younger generation is really digitally savvy, so those assets online for us are extremely popular.
So, in conclusion, that's actually where I wanted to go, because you and I, it's been really exciting to watch how progressive you've been over the last several years in educating yourself and the station on changes in the way that consumers engage with and consume content, right? So the idea is that with Netflix and Apple investing over $1 billion in original programming and Amazon Video now being integrated into Apple TV and all, I mentioned Netflix, you have a shift in the way that people are engaging with content. And the reason why I said I think you're very progressive, I don't feel like you're late to the game. I feel like you've noticed this for years ago. But so share with us how important is it that WVIA thinks about and then addresses how people want to receive the content that they're getting from WVIA?
So we moved from when I first came on, it was our web was primarily our website was primarily a promotional site. Now it's content, and so PBS and we were one of the beta sites for Passport with our digital team.
Which is what, your Netflix,
That's
if you will?
Netflix. So $60 a year. You can go behind the firewall and you can watch everything from Ken Burns to our regional documentaries.
Yep.
So we put them out in front of the firewall for like 2 weeks. And then we put it behind, and so we are seeing. It's. I wouldn't say it's quick, but it's quick enough to notice that people are joining to get the Passport, to get to that content, so they can go on and they can watch Novas and masterpieces and also our documentaries, and so and we can see. You can tell who's watching what, and then as those numbers, we say we should be doing more of this.
Sure.
Because people really like this, and so we produce content based on the consumption habits of our members. So from
that's in front of the paywall, so it's not behind the paywall. Are you producing webisodes, or are you producing content just for the web?
Yes. yeah, we are. So so now our strategy is we're producing digital first. And then we put it on TV, if in fact people are consuming it. Because producing for television is a lot more expensive.
Sure.
So when we saw how popular the Vietnam web series was, that was digital first. We made an anthology and we put it on television.
Yep.
So we're producing digital first. And sometimes we're in the meeting, we start talking about these shows. I'm like, whoa. Remember, it has to be produced digital first.
Sure.
And so we're producing, customized content based on how they're viewing our content online.
So the mission doesn't need to change. It's just that the delivery mechanism needs to be consumer focused. I mean, if a customer wants to engage with content on their mobile device, or if they wanted to, I think one of the revolutions in the way content is consumed is the idea of a rewind and fast forward, a pause and watch it later.
Yeah.
So if there's a show that's going to be on WVIA on Thursday at 7 p.m., in my case, and the kids have soccer, I want to record it and I want to go back and watch it, or if I could watch it on my phone. So I think the big change is that people want convenience. They want it kind of now. They want to be able to binge it. So if any of these PBS programs that you mentioned, folks may come into a second or third series in a show and want to go back and watch the first and second series. That happened with a number of the original content on Netflix and Amazon, where people were like, it wasn't until the third generation of a particular show, like Breaking Bad or something like that, where then someone went back and wanted to watch the whole thing. So the idea of binging. So how quickly is it changing? Is this
like me? I predict in our lifetime that channels won't exist as we know them. You won't be turning on your television and watching a channel. Now look at Hulu. They're streaming sports.
Yeah.
And you can go back and watch the game, the Steelers game from the other night if you want.
Yeah.
At first I thought, well, everything's going to go over the top. Meaning, when you want it, not you run home at 8 o'clock to watch it.
Sure.
You're going to, and except for news and sports. That was my first prediction. Now I'm saying no.
Yeah.
I was in New York City at a meeting and at lunch, and a woman was watching MSNBC right on her phone while she was eating.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Of course.
So you the way we consume, and they are going to have television receivers in our phones. I think that the spectrum is where our signal flows, and that's how people get us over the air. I think it's all going to be streamed content, and I think the spectrum is going to be used for very different things than we know today. It's going to be technology where we have driverless cars and trucks, and it's all going to be happening in the spectrum. How it's going to work, and the spectrum will be an asset for us. But I don't know if it's going to be over the air like we in the future. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
There's a big pipe coming into this place. You can drive a truck through it.
Yeah.
And it just the information is just So when we do productions, for example, this is amazing that New York used to be the Berlin Wall. Nothing came over. The Hudson River was a Berlin Wall. No production ever came out of New York. Now we have clients in New York, and in D.C. and in Boston, where we're editing their production. We post it. They send it back with editing notes. They don't even. There used to be these big suites, and the client sit in the back, and the editor be there. And
sure.
They don't have to. You could be in Montana and edit.
So recently, WVIA participated in the Spectrum auction, and as a result of that, you were able to sell some of your Spectrum, which gives this station the ability to think about who it might be 10, 20, 30 years down the road. In conclusion, what does WVIA look like? Is it the same mission? Or is it something else that you think that you could leverage technology to do something differently with the assets of this station?
I think our tagline on television is telling your stories. I think we will continue to grow that side of our business, being, really the regional storytellers. And I also see us involving our staff in the community much differently than just creating content that's going to, flow through our 3 platforms: TV, radio, and digital. We did something called Be My Neighbor Day up at PNC. We collected, over 100 lightly used jackets for underprivileged kids, and food and for the food banks and things like that, and everybody was up there, and we had over 1,200 people participate, so I see us doing more of that. It's seeing where the void is and seeing if we can help out in that way, and then using our platforms to promote the work of other nonprofits as well. And the work that they're doing and why it's important. So, we are going to be telling the good story. We get all this stuff coming at us all day, right? And a lot of it's not that good. But what about the people that are on the ground working and trying to do really good things in their communities? And what are they? And so using our platforms to promote the work of those people, hopefully will help them get more traction as well. So I don't see us moving off the mark too much of where we are right now. I think the work we do, it's cut out for us in the community. Like I said, these major corporations own the other stations. They aren't going to do this.
You can't have that. And I think that one of the reasons that I connect to the mission of this organization is that it is service first. You serve others, right? You don't serve shareholders, right, that want you to drive profits. You get to serve the community, to tell their stories, to be a platform, to host events, whether they be congressional debates, whether they be a discussion of veterans issues. And I think that's one of the things that makes WVIA special. So it's so awesome to hear you kind of, look 10, 20, 30 years down the road and still come back to that mission of being a platform to storytell. So thank you so much for being on my AMA series.
Pleasure.
And guys, we will see you for episode 97, where I will be interviewing Tom Boatsman, the president and CEO of Misericordia University. I'll see you guys in the next episode.